What if Doctor Who hadn't been axed in 1989? That is something many have tried to guess at, and now it's my turn. I'll be going through this concept at the rate of one season per episode. These videos are based on information released by John Nathan Turner, Andrew Cartmel, Ben Aaronovitch, and a lot, and I mean a lot, of guesswork.
Season 46 of Doctor Who would have aired between the 5th of September and the 7th of November 2009 and would be made up of 10 90-minute episodes. However, unlike the previous year, there would be no Christmas special. However, in February the following year, a third Doctor Who movie would have been released entitled Doctor Who Vengeance and would be Paterson Joseph's last outing as a Doctor, making Season 46 his last season. This would also mark the first season for Robert Sherman as script editor, and the third for Gary Russell as producer. Faith Penhale would be replacing Judy Gardner as executive producer, with Harry Stephen Bear remaining in his executive producer role. Paterson Joseph would star as a Doctor with Sophia Okonedo for a second full season as Lizzie Clark. While Angela Jensen left in the previous series, she would feature as a guest star in 2 episodes, but not in a companion role. However, something interesting about this season is that an old companion from the show's past would be brought on board for 3 episodes in the middle of the season. Sherman and Russell decided to do this as they loved the 3 companion dynamic in season 45, and they knew that bringing back an older companion would create a renewed interest and buzz around the show. Originally, Sherman and Russell wanted to bring back Sammy Thompson. However, Jennifer Lean was in strict retirement from acting, and instead was pursuing a career as a nutritionist, so she refused to return. Sherman and Russell considered other 90s companions like Grace, and most strongly Bernie Summerfield. However, it was quickly pointed out to them that both characters died. So in the end, it was decided that the character they would bring back would be Tika Javanka, played by Janet Fielding, and she would join on as a companion with the Doctor and Lizzie for 3 episodes in the middle of the season. With a new script editor, naturally changes were made to the season, one of them being the title sequence. All the text on the title sequence was changed into the standard Doctor Who font and made a yellowish colour, instead of the arguably hard to read look of season 44 and 45. The end credits were changed style after complaints of season 45's going too quickly because of the BBC's new 30-second credit rule, so the style was changed. Also, the TARDIS interior would have been slightly revamped, adding more stuff in there and giving it even more of a homely feel. This season, under the leadership of Robert Sherman, the writers' room would have taken a larger role, and many of the staff writers were changed. The new lineup, while still having a few of the older people, included Ronald D. Moore, Joseph Lister, Phil Ford, Nicholas Briggs, David Weddle, and Bradley Thompson. These people would be responsible, along with Sherman, for crafting the season's story and coming up with the basic ideas of individual stories, then assigning writers. Some may be themselves or just another writer. This season's main focus would be on just having fun adventures with the Doctor and Lizzie, and were branded as such. It won't be a ridiculously serialised story with an overall villain like previous seasons, and while character arcs still run through the season, mostly it would have been episodic, which would have been a breath of fresh air for the serialised nature of previous seasons, and give us more room to breathe. Far across the universe, a missile is fired in a war between two powerful civilizations. However, many years later, that missile reaches Earth and kills 5,000 people. Now units ask the help of the Doctor to find out who did this and, if necessary, prepare for war. But will the possibility of this being a simple mistake ever be considered? This would be a unit story and would open up the season with a bang. Originally, Robert Sherman was going to write this, but after realising his workload with Doctor Who Vengeance and everything else, the job was handed over to writer David Hare. This episode would feature returning characters of Angela Jensen and Brigadier Bambera, now promoted to Major General Bambera. We'd have a new spin on the alien invasion story, where the catalyst for events, this missile, is actually just a mistake from a war far away and was not intended to hit Earth. This story would be a big political and cerebral story spanning all four corners of the Earth and would give a great sense of scale to the events that would have taken place. A whole portion of this episode would be filmed in America, at CBS. Angela would be there as Prime Minister, and we'd see her acting very different to how she acted in a very similar situation in the Silurian Awakening, as she has learned a lot from travelling with the Doctor and is far less warmongering. However, unit are much more fearful in an attack and are ready to go to war. The Doctor and Lizzie land in Victorian London, Whitechapel to be precise. There is an air of fear and dread as they walk the streets, especially among females. It's 1891, and the most famous serial killer in history is about to strike for the final time. But who is he, and why did he stop? This story is set in Victorian London and deals with the famous Jack the Ripper murders. It would have a feel of a real Hinchcliffian type Who story, and would see the Doctor and Lizzie taking on the roles of detectives to find out who Jack the Ripper really was. However, it turns out that Jack the Ripper was actually an alien refugee who, to survive, needed to feed on people and kill them. However, the Doctor and Lizzie work this out. They offer Jack the Ripper safe passage to any world he wants, and they leave in the TARDIS. The Doctor makes the point that he doesn't necessarily condone what Jack has done to stay alive, but understands that for his species it's necessary. Many people in the audience would have found this quite hap-handed and not the best message, but it's what the show decides to offer. The TARDIS is brought back to Gallifrey as the Doctor is required to testify in court. Many years ago, the Doctor was sent on a mission to infiltrate the Uvak-Noski, an off-the-books group which supplied the Poplin in their war against the Bolossians. The Doctor witnesses the death of a man known to him as Quilly, and now his wife is out to uncover the truth of what happened to her husband. The rogue has agreed to hold a trial, and the whole fabric of Time Lord society is at stake. This episode would be a direct sequel to the season 41 episodes Trust is a Lie, and explores the consequences of what happened. Quilly's wife, Mrs. Quillington, tries to find out the truth over what happened to her husband. The story partly set in a courtroom and partly told in flashbacks through the Matrix spread along the runtime. These flashbacks are about 25% clips from the episode Trust is a Lie, but to avoid another The Name Shakespeare, William Shakespeare, and to tell the story they want to tell, 75% of the flashbacks would be newly recorded material with the original actors. Therefore, Anthony Head, Derek Jacobi, Don Warrington, Kate Amara, John Patton, James Otis, Harry Welsh, Sam Green, Wallace Jackery, and Joseph Culp would have all returned as their original characters. These segments would be the first filmed for the season, and they would have been recorded months before the rest and at the same time as the Panopticon episode The Dice has been cast. This would also mark the first story with more than one Doctor in it, with new material, not to be counted as a multi-Doctor story. Also, as this episode takes place in Gallifrey, the main cast of Panopticon would have been featured. Timothy Dalton as the Rogue, Siobhan Begum as the Rani, David Tennant as Will Adams, Louise Jameson as Leela, John Leeson as K9, Cameron Gillan as Kendra, Christopher Biggins as Francis, Claire Higgins as Ohelia, and Katrina Olsen as Orfina. This would have been a much-loved fan-favourite episode which explores the consequences of past adventures and gives us more insight into the episode Trust is a Lie. the Doctor and Lizzie land in 1959 Las Vegas for a holiday. However, when a strange power cut occurs, the Doctor and Lizzie's perception devices stop working, leaving the Doctor and Lizzie to fend for themselves in a racist and bigoted 1950s American society. This story focuses on the simple question: what would happen if the perception device stopped working while in history? The perception device, of course, being a tool introduced in episode 2 of season 44, which will change other people's perception of the Doctor and his companions so they blend in and they don't question why they are there. However, it was more used by the producers not to have to address the issue of racism both the Doctor and Lizzie would face in historical settings. However, the facade deals with that, seeing the perception device stop working in 1959 Las Vegas. The story mostly deals with this and shows how difficult it was to be black in America at the time. There will be a B-plot about some power-eating aliens who cause a perception device to break down. However, the vast majority of the story will focus on the racial implications of this. This story will be a fan favourite as it shows the brutality of history, which is something Doctor Who doesn't really do as often as you would think. The Doctor and Lizzie are left stranded in Singapore after the TARDIS relocates to the UK due to its hostile action displacement protocol. Luckily for the two of them, there's a flight going to Heathrow Airport. However, things can't be that simple, and when a mysterious entity infiltrates the aeroplane, no one is to be trusted, not even the Doctor himself. This story reintroduces Tegan Javanka back into the Doctor's life and does it in rather an interesting way. It starts off with the Doctor and Lizzie at the end of a normal adventure, but the TARDIS strands them in Singapore due to its hostile action displacement protocol, where in times where the TARDIS might be threatened, it will relocate to a safe place, that being the UK. So the Doctor and Lizzie have to go back to the UK on an aeroplane. However, on the aeroplane, the Doctor notices that the chief air stewardess is none other than his former travelling companion, Tegan Javanka. He tells Lizzie about this, but Tegan does not realise and thinks the Doctor is some other nutter trying to get a look at her. When the plane goes up in the air though, it stops. Just stops, and there's no communication anywhere. The plane is just dead in the air, the engines aren't running, the pilots aren't flying, but it just hangs in the air. And then all of a sudden, the doors open, and the vast majority of people are just sucked out. The Doctor manages to close the door just in time, saving about 10 people. However, it all descends into madness as Tegan starts repeating everything that everyone is saying, and it's obvious to the Doctor that someone has taken her over. However, the paranoia is high among the survivors and they want to kill her. Soon it gets worse and worse and the Doctor is taken over too. In the end, Lizzie realises she must break the plane out of the spatial lock. With help from the survivors, they manage to do that and they land in Heathrow eventually to face questioning. Tegan, now aware of who the Doctor is, makes a break for it and leaves with the Doctor and Lizzie in the TARDIS. This story would have shown the real psychological horror elements of the show and would be really popular. It would have been loosely based upon a proposed story by Russell T Davies for season 39 called Midnight. That was rejected because Chris Sandeman thought it was far too dark. However, Gary Russell and Robert Shearman decided to take it and roll with it. The TARDIS lands in the future on an alien planet shrouded in darkness. The Doctor, Lizzie and Tegan are plunged into terror when they lose the TARDIS down a deep chasm, leaving themselves on a space base positioned on an impossible planet in the orbit of a black hole. Meanwhile, an entity who identifies himself as Satan is awakening and beginning to cause chaos among the crew. This story would be the second with Tegan and would be set in the future on the planet Crop Tor, inside a sanctuary base. It would be one of the darker stories of the season, focusing on the literal devil. A new alien species called the Ood would be introduced too, a slave race of humanity. In this episode, the Doctor and Lizzie would be split up, and the Doctor and Tegan would be mostly together in the second half of the episode. This would really explore and strengthen the relationship between them. However, by the end of the episode, Tegan decides that one adventure with the Doctor was enough, and she just wants to go home now. Trying to get back home, the Doctor, Lizzie and Tegan are thrown off course and land in the quiet seaside town of Fawnington in Suffolk. However, it's like the village that time forgot. The inhabitants are living the same day over and over again. What's so special about the 1st of September 1991? Why haven't the villagers noticed the same song has been #1 for years? And just where on earth has the sea disappeared to? The Doctor, Lizzie and Tegan must solve the mystery before the visitors return. This is the final story in the Tegan trilogy and sees the return of the Autons. It is set in a seaside town in 1991 and that seems to be reliving the same day over and over again. It turns out they are actually in a fake British seaside town in Uzbekistan that is entirely populated with autonomous Autons, and the Nestine consciousness wants the crude oil to make more plastic. Eventually, the Nestine consciousness is defeated and the Doctor, Lizzie and Tegan leave. The Doctor drops Tegan off home with a renewed sense of ambition, and the Doctor tells Tegan that maybe she can go further than just a chief air stewardess, and lets her know about a team of alien defenders in LA who could use her help. The Bolossian people stand on the brink of extinction. Numbering just 30,000, they have an estimated 50 years of life left. Lieutenant Fassel contacts the Doctor and asks for help. However, will the Bolossians accept the Doctor, a man who from their point of view helped cause their own genocide? This story will see us return to the New Bellons and the Bolossian people, where they explore the survival of the race and their possible extinction. We'll also see how they've come to hate the Doctor and their relationship between the Bolossians and the Gallifreyans. This story would also see the return of Alexander Siddig as Lieutenant Fassel, who in the words of The Guardian, is the most interesting thing to happen to the tiresome Bolossian storyline in quite a while. This would be intended by Gary Russell to be a cap-off of the era and finish off the Bolossian storyline once and for all. The Doctor and Lizzie land in a haunted house where mysterious whispers and secrets in the shadow lie. However, two scientists are there searching for ghosts and a monstrous creature appears there in the night. The terrifying grasp of Erasmus Darkling reaches out from centuries past. Doctor and Lizzie discover the secrets of Erasmus Darkling, but are they too late? Ghosts from the past rise up and the quest to find the missing children reaches a climax. It seems like nothing can stop the ancient alchemists' rise to victory. This episode will be a traditional haunted house story and we see the Doctor and Lizzie searching for ghosts in an old house with two scientists. The main villain would be a man called Erasmus Darkling, who is an alien scientist who poses as a magician and alchemist under the employment of Lord James Marchwood, who tries to open a portal between dimensions to get back to his own home. Innocent people who lived in the house over the years got trapped between the dimensions and appears as ghosts in the house. This will be considered as one of the weakest stories in the seasons, and in general being seen as quite camp, especially with Donald Sumter playing Erasmus Darkling. The Rogue visits Carm, where he meets an ancient soothsayer who tricks him into changing history based upon one question: what if the Doctor was still president of Gallifrey? Without the Doctor returning to Earth, the whole world fell into ruins, and now a simple refugee, Lizzie Clark is the only one who can undo the damage. But how? This will be the finale of the season, and it'll be the penultimate Patterson Joseph story. It's strange then that the Doctor is not in it much, and it mainly focuses on Lizzie. However, this does make some sort of sense as it would be Lizzie's final story, as she would not be going on to do Doctor Who Vengeance. We begin on Khan with the Rogue, who meets an ancient soothsayer, who tricks the Rogue into changing history so that the Doctor never left Gallifrey in Doctor Who Revelation and stayed on as Lord President. And then we focus on Lizzie, living a normal everyday life with her boyfriend, and she sees on the television the pub the Prime Minister Angela Jensen making a speech saying that Earth is now controlled by the Solarians and resistance is futile. She states that 70% of the population will be rounded up and taken to labour camps. The rest will be relocated. No one can believe this. Everyone thinks it's a joke, and then the doors of the pub are slammed open, and in come dozens of Solarians, taking random people away, kicking and screaming. Lizzie just sits there, not believing what she sees. We then follow her as she and her boyfriend are relocated to a council estate in Leeds, where she lives there in a tiny house with about a dozen other people. And then a couple of months later, they hear a massive explosion, and they go outdoors and they see all of the Silurians falling to the ground and dying. They all celebrate. The Silurians have been defeated, but it's not long until they are replaced by the Schalke, taking even more people and killing them. One night, Lizzie goes to a walk, something which she isn't supposed to do, and she's approached by a strange woman, Katie Tillinger. She tells Lizzie that she's from a group of people who are working to fight the Schalke and liberate the human race. Initially, Lizzie refuses. However, over the next few years, life gets worse and worse and worse, until there's a giant explosion and millions of people are wiped out due to an unknown laser blast which hits the Earth. Lizzie decides to come back to find Katie and accept the offer. She's taken away to a secret X-Unit base. Unit don't exist anymore, where they're working on building an army against the Schalke. Katie introduces Lizzie to Sarah Jane Smith, Jo Jones, Elizabeth Shaw, and Melanie Bush, who she states are all previous associates of a man called the Doctor. Lizzie states that she doesn't know who this Doctor is. Katie then takes Lizzie to a cell, and inside sits Angela Jensen, the woman who gave Earth away. Katie tells Lizzie to go in there and speak to her, but it's too much for Lizzie and she just runs away. Katie runs after her, explaining that the timeline that they're in is wrong, and something happened to stop the Doctor from ever returning to Earth, leaving it open to invasion. Lizzie again states she doesn't know where the Doctor is, and Katie explains that in the real proper timeline, both her and Angela were companions of the Doctor and travelled with him in space and time. Lizzie thinks she's absolutely barking mad, so Katie decides to take her to another cell and opens it up to find the Rogue sitting there. Katie leaves her alone with the Rogue, and the Rogue explains what's happened and that he needs her to travel to Gallifrey with him and make the Doctor leave Gallifrey, changing history back to the way it's supposed to be. Lizzie asks why it's got to be her, and the Rogue explains that she's a nexus point in the Doctor's life and it all hinges around her. Because of the fact that in an alternate timeline she defeated the Schalke, she became the nexus point. After persuasion, Lizzie agrees and Katie takes her back into the main part of the base. Katie tells everyone it's a go and they begin, and then we get 2 days of preparation and briefing before Lizzie's finally ready to go. Katie gives her a makeshift vortex manipulator made with the Rogue's help, and Lizzie vanishes into the mists of time. Cut to Gallifrey, and in the closing scenes of Doctor Who Revelation, we see Lizzie navigate around the Citadel, slipping into scenes here and there with green screen. Lizzie runs up to the Rogue and tells him that he must make the Doctor leave Gallifrey and that he can't stay. The Rogue tells Lizzie he wants the Doctor to leave as much as she does, but this doesn't work, and we see the Doctor making his speech in the Panopticon stating that he will be staying on as president. Lizzie then bursts into the Doctor's office herself and explains to him what has happened and that he must leave. The Doctor doesn't understand or believe her, so Lizzie jumps out the window of the Doctor's office, killing herself and framing the Doctor, causing him to be made to leave, and he goes off in the TARDIS. The timeline then resets and reverses, and we see Lizzie on the TARDIS with the Doctor, waking up. The Doctor asks what's wrong, and Lizzie explains what happened. The Doctor thinks it was just a dream, but Lizzie explains because it's a nexus point, her consciousness was sucked in an alternate timeline, and now she, the same consciousness, is dying. And with that, the camera pulls away from the TARDIS into the vortex, where the words Doctor Who will return in Doctor Who Vengeance are displayed on screen. And then, in credits, the series ends. This episode really ends the series with a bang and gets us ready for Doctor Who Vengeance. This episode works well as a send-off to the Joseph era, basically being, what if the Joseph era never happened? It is of course features the return of Timothy Dalton, the Rogue, Jacqueline Pierce as Angela Jensen, as well as the Leftover team and a few of the minor characters from the past seasons. The inclusion of Leftover was because Gary Russell basically couldn't help himself. However, because their inclusion in Mad World was popular, it led Paramount to announcing that a movie based around the Leftover team would be scheduled for release in 2010 and would be written by Russell T Davies and Stephen Garwood. And so there we have it, season 46, the final season for Joseph as the Doctor, but not his final story. No, that's the third Doctor Who feature film, Doctor Who Vengeance, which would have been released in February 2010. So watch out for Doctor Who Vengeance video next time. Until then, goodbye.